2E kids are very, very complex. It's a concept, and it's a hard concept to understand and explain, and there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of self-doubt. So it's really about this acceptance and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and say, maybe I don't have all the answers, but I love my child, and we're out there and we're together and we're doing the best that we can.
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber. There are many aspects to running Tilt and doing this podcast that I love, and one of them is introducing the Tilt community to helpful resources that have the potential to improve the quality of their families' lives. Today, I'm happy to be dedicating this episode to one such resource, an organization called the Twice Exceptional Children's Advocacy, better known as TECA. TECA's mission is to help parents understand what twice exceptionality is and help them identify whether their children are 2E. They assist parents in finding and advocating for the education and resources their children require and provide a strong, vibrant, and accepting community for 2E children and their families. Today, I get two guests for the price of one. So I have both Melissa Sornick, a licensed clinician who works with children and families, and who's also a co-founder and the president of TECA. And I also have Maratea Cantarella, TECA's executive director. And as you'll hear from the episode, the mission of TECA is very personal for both these women, and they're going to share their stories as well as give us insights into the types of support TECA offers for parents with 2E kids. And before I get to that conversation, in the past few months, the audience for this podcast has grown substantially. So I wanted to share with you one of the free resources I offer on Tilt Parenting in case you're new to Tilt or you haven't had a chance to poke around on the website. So far, nearly 1,500 parents have participated in the Differently Wired 7-Day Challenge. This is a virtual challenge whereby every day for 7 days, you'll get a short 1 to 3 minute video delivered to your inbox featuring a practical shift you can make in your world to help you have a more positive and optimistic experience in parenting your unique kiddo. You'll also be invited to join a private Facebook group with other parents who've participated in or are currently going through the challenge. And I've heard from parents all over the world that this challenge has made an immediate difference in their day-to-day life, which is fantastic because that's exactly why I created it. I personally have some pretty disruptive transitions happening in my world at the moment, and I am leaning into those strategies more than ever, and honestly, they have been so helpful. I would love for you to join in. It won't add more to your plate, but rather give you some helpful food for thought as you go about your daily life. To get started, just sign up at tiltparenting.com/7day and you will immediately get the first video. Lastly, if you get value out of this podcast, please consider supporting it by making a small monthly contribution to help me cover the costs of production. There's an easy way to do this too. There's an online platform called Patreon. So I have a Patreon campaign for Tilt Parenting. It is funded by listeners just like you. And that campaign is helping me pay my editor, Donna. Donna takes these recorded conversations, my intros and outros. She cleans them up, edits them, tags them for iTunes, uploads them onto my SoundCloud account. It literally saves me hours of time each week, and it is allowing me to focus on all the other pieces of keeping Tilt going and supporting this community. So if you want to support the work of this podcast and the work of Tilt Parenting, just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting, and Patreon is spelled Patreon. You can also find a link on the Tilt Parenting website on any of the show notes pages. Thank you so much for considering. And now here is my conversation with Melissa and Maratea. Hey, Mara and Melissa, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Yeah, nice to be with you, Debbie.
Yeah, so this is only the second time I've done a podcast interview with two different people, and you guys are in different locations. So this should be exciting and interesting, and I'm looking forward to bringing double the perspective to the conversations. So let's just dive in. And first, if you could both just take a turn introducing who you are. I always ask people what their personal why is and, what their personal connection is to the work that they do in the world. And I know this is personal for both of you. So would you mind just giving us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Okay. So this is Melissa, and my background is I am the parent of a 2E. He is now 20. He'll be 26 years old next month. And I guess my journey began with him. And then in trying to help him, I realized that I also was what we call twice exceptional. And so that journey started. And then I really wanted to dedicate my time and my life to helping families of 2E individuals. And so I became an advocate and a licensed clinical social worker. And now I have a private practice and I create programs for 2E kids and provide a lot of parent support here on Long Island. And I also teach, I'm an adjunct professor at a local college, Malloy College, here on Long Island. And I teach a class to undergraduate social work students on how to work with children with special needs and their family. And I love what I do.
That's awesome. Very cool. And how about you, Mara?
So I also came to this work because I was the parent of a twice exceptional child. I had been working for years and years as a fundraising consultant. And as my son's needs became more and more consuming of my time and our resources, I realized I couldn't do my job and raise him. He was born with bilateral club feet. And so we knew right away that he was going to need a lot of issues. And I think we thought of him as primarily a kid with special needs. But then as he developed and we realized that there were more issues aside from just the physical problems he had, we realized there were other things going on. He wasn't a kid who made eye contact. He had a lot of sensory issues. He seemed very uncomfortable in the world and was hard to soothe. And as he, went through the toddler years and into the preschool years, we really realized we had a lot on our hands with this kid. And every time we tried a new strategy to help him with his growing behavioral challenges, we realized he was outsmarting us at every turn. And by the time he was in first grade, we had a full neuropsych, and that's when we really got some insight into the extent of his giftedness and the extent of his challenges. And it helped us really understand why he was such an anxious and uncomfortable kid. And as we went through the elementary school years, I realized, I needed to leave my job and really focus full time on him. And we did the revolving door of schools for a little while until we found, we learned the term twice exceptional from a school that had been recommended to us. And that was the first inkling that there were other families going through what we were going through, who had children who were maybe not necessarily similar to our child, but certainly different in ways that he was different. And it was the first time that I found of a community of parents who were going through similar challenges that my husband and I were going through. And that's where I met Melissa. She was the director of admissions, and it became clear to us pretty quickly that we were kindred spirits. And I started the Parents Association at that school, and she and I started doing programs together for the parent community. And that's when I realized I really wanted to be working with this population and helping parents who had navigated a similarly heartbreaking and frustrating and lonely path to get to that place. And I just felt like we have all this knowledge. Let's share it with people so they don't have to feel so lonely. And, we're clearing a path, basically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's so interesting hearing your stories. And I think so many of the Tilt listeners, just based on the feedback I get, do have twice exceptional kids. And in fact, I think a lot of people, because my book has the word exceptional in the subtitle, assume that that's kind of all that we're about. But it's certainly, that is a large proportion of our community have these 2E kids. And, you know that I'm raising a 2E kid. And it was a term that I wasn't aware of. And in fact, I only stumbled upon TECA after I had launched Tilt Parenting and just continuing to look for resources. So, and it is such a valuable resource. And that's why I really wanted to have you guys on the show today, because I want to make sure that our audience is aware of its existence. So can you tell us, maybe a little bit more, it sounds like we got the beginning of the founding story. Tell us what TECA is and, what you started from and where you're going.
Okay, I can speak to that. And actually, the interesting thing is that people, and what people don't realize, I don't think, or know, is that actually TECA has been around since 2003. And we were actually founded in the same year that the 2E newsletter came out. And it was an interesting time. And I was going to speak a little bit more about, my journey, because that was how TECA really came to be. When my son was little, we didn't really think that we couldn't wait for him to go to school. We weren't seeing any signs of anything except for the giftedness, which I think happens with a lot of families. And he was reading by the time he was 3 years old. And he was very precocious. He was very articulate. He was friendly. We were living in a cooperative apartment building in Queens, and he was friends with everybody. And I couldn't wait for him to start school. But I think he just went in there knowing so much. And then the thing was that he was bored. There was anxiety. We hear a lot about asynchronous development. And I think this was a classic case of having that asynchrony and the social emotional pieces not catching up and then being very misunderstood. So it was almost like somebody pulled the rug out from under me, because I thought, I've got this brilliant kid. I don't understand why I'm getting calls from the school. And what tends to happen too is that you have questions from other people, like your family says, well, I don't understand, so smart. Why are things going awry? Or friends whose kids are starting school and their kids are going into school and everything is just fine. And I felt like I was really losing my cohort, and I started to feel incredibly isolated. We moved to Long Island, and when my son was still having difficulties, we needed to apply for an IEP to get him some sort of supports. And that was challenging too, because you go in for your IEP and they look at testing results, and that's when we found out just how gifted he was. Okay, so now what's going on? And here on Long Island, we have something called a special education PTA in many of our districts. And I joined that group because I needed a group and I needed somebody who might understand me. And this was a group of parents whose children had learning disabilities or other challenges. And when I started talking about my son, they all said, well, we don't understand. Your son is really bright. What's going on? And I felt very different. I became very much aware of feeling very different and not quite fitting into that group. It was at the same time that they asked me to become a liaison to the gifted group in our school district. I reached out to them and I never got a call back. And I said, well, now what do? I don't fit here and I don't fit there. And it was around that time that I realized that, or maybe a couple of years down the road, when I was still looking for that program. I was still looking for that right thing, that right school for my son, and I couldn't find it. And I stumbled on this little community where I live now, and I've been here for about 17 years. And I thought, oh, that's a place where there's a small village, and I just needed a change. And so I moved. And when I moved here and I became involved with this school district, the director of special education actually connected me with somebody. He said, there's another parent in this school district who has a child who is also incredibly bright but having challenges in school. So I was connected with her, and then somebody in another district, and that's how TECA came to be. It was three of us that formed the organization, because what we realized was in speaking with each other. We didn't have to explain. I always felt like I was making excuses, or I was rationalizing, or felt that I had to defend what I was doing, my decisions as a parent, not being able to get answers about things. But with these two other parents, I realized they would just sit there nodding their heads and saying, yes, I understand exactly what you're going through. And it was at that point that I said, we need to do this for other parents, because I'm sure that they're out there. And it was at that point that we decided to form a grassroots organization, because we started finding other parents who were in a similar situation, having these really bright kids, not knowing what we were going to do for them, and not having somebody to talk to ourselves and to try to find resources with. So that was the beginning of TECA, and that's how we started. And we formed our website back then, and we did some of the things that Mara has now taken and run with, and just expanded this into a really new and vibrant online community.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Synbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon, and that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Synbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for a limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Synbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls, and with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free. There are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words. Straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. Well, I think that, when you said that you didn't fit in here, you didn't fit in there, that really does sum it up for so many of us. I always describe this particular population as being just particularly stuck because it's just such a complicated fit. Everything seems to be a little more complicated, and the problems or the challenges are unique for this population. And so I'm grateful for the resource. And it is really a relief to find people who really get it, who understand the asynchronicity and all the challenges, especially because these kids often don't do well in traditional gifted education because of the other neural differences that they have. So yeah, I think there's such a need for this. So what I'd love to know more about is what listeners could expect to find on TECA's website, the kinds of programs that you guys are starting to offer now. I've been a member of the community for a while now, and I love getting my newsletter, and there's so many good resources, but tell us what parents could gain from tapping into what TECA has to offer.
Sure. So, when I started working with Melissa, she invited, first we were working within our school community that we were both a part of. And eventually she asked me if I would be willing to come on as TECA's new executive director and kind of revitalize it after it had been dormant for a few years, after, the founding family's kids were moving on to college and the initial wave of activity was kind of dissipating. And I was really excited to do that. And so we started thinking about, how do we connect families who are scattered all over the place? It's not like there are, communities that plant their 2E flag and say, come here, and even though I happen to live in a community that is very diverse and there are a lot of 2E families here, no one really wants to talk about it. No one wants to, put their hand up and say, I am struggling in this particular way. So we really wanted to create an online space where people could come together, feel safe, get information, get validation, and feel like they're not alone. So we started with our online support groups, and we created a year-long syllabus that is based on SENG support groups, supporting the emotional needs of the gifted. Melissa is a trained SENG group facilitator. And so we adapted that to more specifically meet the needs of twice exceptional kids. And we started, and their parents. And we created this support group that was really designed to help parents feel that they're in a safe space. They can talk about what's going on with them and their kids and the challenges they face. And parents often talk about their isolation, how their kids are isolated in school. And as we know, we often make friends through our kids, right? And when our kids aren't making friends, then we're not making friends. And that was certainly my experience. I would, I have a daughter who's older than my son. I would take her to school and would, wait in the playground for the teachers to line all the kids up, and you'd chat with other parents and make play dates, and you'd get together on the weekends, and the husbands would become involved, and, things really evolved, right? You developed this community. And with my son, I felt like I had two heads, like I'd show up at the playground and no one would talk to me. I was the mom of that kid, right? And so we wanted to have a place where the moms and dads of those kids could come and share their experience, share their strategies, and really talk about what that meant to feel that kind of isolation. And, we get parents from Maine to Minnesota to, Canada to Florida, all coming together to talk about what their experiences are and find community and comfort, and knowing that they're not the only ones. They're not bad parents because they don't understand why their kids behave the way they do. So that was our first online venture. And that, I think that's been really successful. We've also tried to infuse our website with lots of information spelling out kind of the basics of what twice exceptionality is, how to identify it, where to go, what kind of evaluations you might want to get, resources to connect you to professionals who have experience working with twice exceptional kids. What else, Melissa? What am I missing?
Well, I wanted to jump back to the online parent support groups for a moment, because I think that one of the things that I find is so telling is that at the end of a group, there is a feeling of, it's amazing to me how people become so readily willing to share, first of all, to share their stories. So there's definitely a comfort level there that regardless of, as Mara said, we have parents from all over the country. They have different areas of the country, have different educational systems, different regulations. Parents have different resources. Some are homeschooling, some have their children in private or alternative programs, some are in the public education system. But it's always interesting to me that how in one short hour, we form a group where everybody is willing to share and to offer their help. And then there comes the thanks at the end of the call and saying how much better they feel after they get off the call, and they're looking forward to coming again next month and joining us. And to me, that's so important, because I feel like we've made a difference right there, just in an hour, providing parent with some validation. I think that's so important that they wouldn't necessarily have, or giving them, again, a piece of community just for an hour. And when they verbalize how that makes them feel, and that they felt relieved, or they don't feel so alone anymore, so isolated. To me, that speaks to the essence of what TECA is and the reason that TECA was founded in the first place. I just think that community piece is so, so important. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think that parents, I love that you said they just want to talk. They're so willing to share their stories. And I think we have stories to share, and we often feel like we could share them, but if we share with the wrong people, it feels pretty icky if we feel misunderstood or judged or any of those things. So it is a relief, I think, for so many of us to find that community. Now, could you clarify, because I do have a lot of international listeners, you mentioned Canada, but are these groups that are available to people around the world, or is it pretty much North American focused?
Well, we use the Zoom video conference service. So that does have a capability for people to join internationally. Right now, we're doing 3 support groups every month. We have one for parents of kids under the age of 13, and that's on a Wednesday night at 8 p.m. We have a second group for parents of teens. That's on a Monday night at 8 p.m. And then we have a third group, which is open to all parents of twice exceptional kids. And that's at noon on a Wednesday. And we have our schedule up on our website, which is TECA2E.org, TECA, the number 2E.org. So as long as you're awake, you can join us.
Yeah, that teen group is on my list. I'm looking forward to some community with parents of 2E teens, because it's an interesting time.
Oh, yeah. And we're talking about everything from, how do you talk to your kids about sex and homework and hygiene, any conversation that you would have with your teen, we are all talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Making a little note here. So tell me a little bit more then about, I'd love to hear about the conference, which I know is coming up. You have an annual conference. And then I don't know if you have any big plans that you want to divulge or, just kind of, I'm always curious to know where people want to go with their vision for their organization.
Sure. So, well, first about the conference, that's going to be on Friday, November 9th at Malloy College, which is in Rockville Center, New York, just across the Queens New York City border in Long Island. And that's going to be a full day of programming designed specifically for parents of twice exceptional kids. This is our third year hosting the conference, and we're really excited about our lineup. We're doing something a little different this year than what we've done in the past. We have decided to create 3 different tracks of programming. So one track is the basics, like for parents who are just starting to dip their toes into the world of twice exceptionality and are deciding whether or not they need to hire an attorney or an advocate to help them with their child's education. We have a session with Devin McEachran, Dr. Devin, on the value of a neuropsych and using that as a tool to help plan your child's educational needs. What else do we have, Melissa? We have an introduction to overexcitabilities and helping you understand your child who is more. Bridging the homeschool divide, which helps parents learn to be effective advocates at school for their kids. So it's a lot of basics. You're in this world, you're just figuring that out, and here's a set of tools to help you move forward. Then we have another track, which is for parents who are maybe more oriented and have their team in place, but are starting to grapple with the teenage years or more complex issues. So we have one session we're calling Sex, Drugs, and Deodorant, which was inspired by our teen support group. We have one we're calling it 2E for Life, and it's talking to parents about how to help their kids understand their complex identities, including their diagnoses, their giftedness, maybe their sexuality, other areas where we're trying to help our kids come to terms with who they are in that very 2E way, and then teaching them to be advocates for themselves. So I'm really excited about that session. We have a really wonderful panel of experts on that. And then what else do we have? We've got, compassionate parenting. Melissa, can you talk a little bit about that one? Because I know you're more familiar with
Sure. So in order to, I really believe, and in my work with families, I believe that there's a lot that goes on with parents, and parents giving themselves permission to accept themselves and to take care of themselves and have compassion for themselves before they can even really have compassion for their children. So it's really about saying, I'm doing what I can. I will make mistakes, but I am, I'm there for my child, and really just how to be accepting. It's very, very hard. Again, we've talked about this. 2E kids are very, very complex. It's a concept, and it's a hard concept to understand and explain, and there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of self-doubt. So it's really about this acceptance and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and say, maybe I don't have all the answers, but I love my child, and we're out there and we're together and we're doing the best that we can. So it's really a workshop that promotes this self-awareness, this self-acceptance, and just the notion of being a good enough parent and accepting yourself unconditionally so you can accept your child unconditionally, and the frustrations and the challenges that come your way, and develop that resilience in yourself.
It's so important. I love that you're touching upon that. I think that's a key piece of this equation. And that's something that I really appreciate about TECA too, is it really is about the parent support. And so much of what we are doing is trying to get tools and strategies to support our kids and their executive functioning and their education, or being that advocate. So I love that self-care. I love the term of just being a good enough parent. And I just think that's great that you have that as a piece of the conference. We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything. Because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
If you like this show, there's a decent chance you'll also enjoy the Shameless Mom Academy. Hi, I'm Sarah Dean, the founder and host of the Shameless Mom Academy. The Shameless Mom Academy is a podcast for moms that centers moms more than it centers your kids. I'm not going to teach you how to make baby food or how to make your 3-year-old or 13-year-old stop having tantrums. Instead, I'm going to bring you back to yourself. For the last 20 years, I've been helping moms through growth and transformation. Inside the Shameless Mom Academy, I help you identify who you are and who you are becoming. Look, motherhood is hard. It brought me to my knees many times and sometimes still does. Returning to who I am and who I am becoming allows me to decide how to show up in all those sticky motherhood moments, but also in all my other relationships and in all the ways I show up in my various communities. So come check out the Shameless Mom Academy wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm willing to bet you'll leave feeling a little inspired and maybe even completely fired up. And you'll probably laugh a few times because I promise we never take ourselves too seriously over here. With 700 episodes to choose from, you're likely going to find something that sparks and speaks to you inside the Shameless Mom Academy.
Yeah. And then we have a whole other session on self-care for parents. So
my favorite subject.
Yeah. So it really is, these 2 tracks are really wholly devoted to helping parents be effective, first by having compassion and empathy for themselves, teaching them strategies and, helping them process how to implement those strategies with their kids. And they really come away from the conference feeling like they've got some real tools in their toolbox to help them face the next day with their kids.
Right. This is something that Mara and I focus on so deliberately with this conference. There are some really wonderful conferences out there where, the resources and the information and all the new information on neurodiversity are out there. What we really make such a conscious effort to do is to bring that information to parents, but to put it in a form where they can take it and use it and apply it. Because as Mara was saying, the tools, we want parents to leave the conference with a toolbox of strategies and real things that they can implement, and that bridging the home-school divide, teaching them how to communicate with their schools. Because again, we can give them loads and loads of information, but without giving them the directions, right? It's like getting the game and the game board and the pieces, but with no directions. Here's what you can do with this information as a parent and feel confident that you can go in and you can get something done for your child or find a resource for your child like that.
That's great. I'm just curious. We talked earlier about twice exceptional being a term that we had to kind of discover on our own, was something that we learned as we discovered more about who our kids were. I've had Tom Ropalewski on the podcast to talk about his film, Twice Exceptional. And, I've had Mike Postma on. We've talked about Twice Exceptional kids. So for me, it seems like it's common knowledge. Everyone knows this stuff. But I'm just curious from your perspective, are you seeing an increased awareness in communities, in schools, for as long as you've been doing this work. Do you think that this is something that people are becoming more in tune with?
I've seen some resistance still. And I think that part of it is that, again, people don't necessarily understand. First of all, it's not a diagnosis. It's sometimes parents will come to me and say, my child was diagnosed with 2E. And I explain to them that 2E is not a diagnosis. It's a conceptualization of describing a child who can have many different kinds of giftedness and many different kinds of challenges, and what happens when these things wrap together. I think that, in my experience, I think that now some people are saying, oh, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is. Or that they're looking at this, when I work with the schools, for instance, they feel overwhelmed by it, because I feel like there's a box that we want children to fit into, and we have certain expectations about how a child should be doing in school and how they should be performing. And our kids just don't fit in that box. They're a little messier than that box. And so when you have this paradigm in the school, anything that falls out of that box really becomes a challenge. And so I think what I'm seeing this year, though, actually with the TECA conference, is I've been reaching out to the districts, because the other thing about our conference this year is we've added a strand for professionals, and Lois Baldwin will be doing a 2.5-hour seminar on teaching twice exceptional children or twice exceptional learners in a mainstream classroom setting. And so for the first time this year, I'm sending out emails, and I'm actually getting responses from these districts saying, oh, we'll circulate this. And so this is the first, I would say in the last maybe year or so, this is the first time. And I think maybe it's that maybe more parents are getting into it, and they're using the term 2E or twice exceptionality when they're going to their meetings, and maybe people are hearing more about it. I also think we're seeing more of these kids. And so we have to be able to explain them somehow. So there's still that little bit of resistance, or thinking, well, we're differentiating so we can do this. But then they're finding that the kids are still having difficulty. So I'm hoping now that they are opening up to listening to potential strategies and interventions that can make education of 2E kids easier and more successful than it's been.
And something that we're trying to do is, as we get more and more members from around New York State in particular, but eventually around the country, we are joining together different pockets of local communities. So right now in New York City, there is a group that I'm involved with that's actively advocating at the City Department of Education. And now I'm just introducing them to a group of families in the Rochester area who are advocating at the state level. And we're trying to work together to join forces, because there's definitely strength in numbers. And so, when you talk about down the road, one of the things we want to start doing is finding and joining these communities from around the country, so that we have a stronger voice to advocate for our kids. Another thing I want to mention, and I hope by saying that I'm not violating our 501c3 status, but basically we're serving to introduce people to one another. We're not doing the advocacy because we are a 501c3. We're not certified to do that work, but we do want to unite the community. The other thing I wanted to add is, you mentioned Tom Ropluski and Mike Postma, and Mike is actually our keynote speaker at the conference this year, which we egregiously failed to mention. We're really excited that he's going to be talking about the inconvenient student as his keynote. And then Tom is going to be joining us. We're concluding the day with a screening of 2E2, and he will be doing a Q&A after that. Yes, he did a screening for us when 2E Twice Exceptional came out, and we've been in touch with him since then. And yeah, we're really thrilled that he's going to be able to join us for the conference this year.
That's fantastic. And that's great that Mike's the keynote. His conversation that we did for the podcast a year ago, and listeners, I'll leave the episode number in the show notes page. It was so powerful. He's such a compelling speaker, and it's so personal to him on so many levels. And I'm sure that will be such a gift for the attendees of the conference. So I want to wrap up, but I would love if you could just let listeners know, and again, I will include all these links in the show notes, but tell listeners the best way if they want to connect with TECA, where they can go, and how you suggest they start joining the community.
Sure. So our website is a great place to start. Like I said, that's TECA2E.org. And we have the join link right at the top of the page. We have information about the conference at our events tab. Our support groups are also listed under our events tab. We're going to be relaunching our online forum called Discussions later on this fall. And that's an online discussion group where parents from really all over the world can get online and post questions for each other and look for support and community, regardless of what time zone they're in. And what else can they can sign up for a support group. We have advocacy basics on there. People can always call in to it's not an official helpline, but people call in all the time asking for help, asking for information, looking for ways to connect. And I'm happy to do, a 20-minute free consultation to find out what's going on with a family and see if there are ways that we can help them. I'm always glad to help families look for the resources that they need in their community. And we use that information. We've been compiling our 2E service provider database, which is a free online database. I think it's the largest resource of 2E providers that exists. We have about 270 professionals who work with twice exceptional kids in lots of different disciplines. They're all based in the United States, but you can do a zip code search by distance and by area of discipline to find people in your area who have experience working with twice exceptional kids. And we also have a suite of downloadable tools to help parents kind of target what it is they're looking for in terms of assistance, help them articulate what's going on with their child. And also we provide them with a questionnaire that they can use for interviewing professionals that they're considering working with. Because when you work with, when you have a twice exceptional child, as Melissa said earlier, they can have any number of areas of giftedness and any number of areas of challenge. And so it's really incumbent upon parents to do their due diligence when researching folks to work with their kids to find the right fit. Because, one occupational therapist who works with some twice exceptional kids may not understand your kid the way they need to be understood. But at least we can, with this database, help you narrow and focus your search to people who are, more likely to get it than not. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I went through with my son was, in New York, you would think, there must be so many resources in New York. Well, there are, but we worked with 5 different psychiatrists before we found one who really understood how my son's challenges interplayed with his areas of strength. And, that was a lot of time and money spent not getting him what he needed. Mm-hmm. And, it was trial and error finding someone who understood him and how to work with him.
I just wanted to jump in on that thought because, Mara, you raised a really good point there that we talk about too. One of the things that we say is that, this is not an either or situation, because you really have to find somebody that understands both and understands how the two come together. And it's to find that person that understands how the challenge affects the gift and vice versa, because our children are a whole. They're not either or. They're both. And you need that understanding from a practitioner.
Yeah, because the whole is definitely more than the sum of its part.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Times 10. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, personally, I'm so glad that I found TECA when I was first launching Tilt. It's been already just such a great resource for me. It's definitely any listeners with 2 kids. It's kind of one-stop shopping. You can get so much. And the newsletter as well that you guys send out is really helpful with links to articles that are super relevant to parents like us. And so I'm just excited to share this episode with our audience and to tap into more of what you're both up to. I hope the conference is really successful, and listeners, make sure you check them out. I'll have links on the show notes page again. And Melissa and Mara, thank you so much for coming by today and sharing your personal stories and just introducing us to this great resource.
Thanks so much, Debbie. It was a pleasure.
It was an absolute pleasure. And thank you, because you are bringing voice to a lot of what we are doing. And so we feel like there's a real synergy between TECA and Tilt, and we're excited to be part of the same community.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. For the show notes for this episode, including links to TECA and the other resources we discussed, visit tiltparenting.com/session127. And an invitation. If you haven't had a chance to check out my new book, Differently Wired, and you're curious to see what it's all about, find out if it's for you, don't forget you can download the first chapter and the table of contents at tiltparenting.com/book. There's also a sign-up bar at the bottom of every page on Tilt Parenting where you can also grab that chapter. If you have already read it and you liked what you read, I would be grateful if you would consider leaving a review on Amazon. And if you're on Goodreads, go ahead and leave one there too. Those reviews really help with visibility. They help make sure that people who are curious and they stumble upon the book and they want to know if it's for them, it helps them to feel secure that they're going to get the kind of information that would benefit them and their families. And of course, I couldn't end a podcast without my weekly reminder to leave a rating or a review, or both, for the show on iTunes. There are a lot of parenting podcasts out there, and those ratings and reviews help keep this little podcast highly visible. That helps me when I send cold emails to thought leaders and authors and those big guests that you guys want me to get on the show, and to be able to say that this is one of the top parenting podcasts out there. It's great when we have those ratings and reviews to back that statement up. So thank you so much. Just go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes and leave a rating and review. It's super easy to do and pain-free. So thanks so much. And thanks again for listening. For more information on Tilt Parenting, visit www.tiltparenting.com.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.